Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Raggio. I'm a senior fellow at Foundation for Defense of Democracies and editor of FDD's Long War Journal. This is Generation Jihad, the podcast that covers all things in what used to be known as the global war on terror, but we now call the Long War. Today, I have a special guest, a friend of the show, Will Selber. Will was on with us last week. Will is a retired Middle East Foreign Affairs officer. He's also the Military Affairs Fellow at the Bulwark and host of not one, but two podcasts. The first one, Shoulder to Shoulder, Untold Stories from a Forgotten War. And the second podcast, Stories from My Brothers, Tales from the Afghan Security Forces. Will, welcome back to Generation Jihad.
Thanks, Bill. It's always a pleasure to be on here. As I tell you every time, Captain Selber is a jealous man today. Captain Selber, who used to listen to your podcast and read all your work, he's envious of where I'm at right now. So it's always a pleasure to join you.
Well, it's an ultimate compliment, Will, and thank you. I do wish I got to know Captain Selber, but it's good to know Will Selber right now. And Will, and thank you for your service, and thank you for everything you've done. Tell us a little bit about your podcast. First, Tell us about Shoulder to Shoulder.
I appreciate it. So it's all part of, I have a Substack, Grumpy Combat Veteran. I write every day. I write about anything that's on my mind. Sometimes it's terrorism related. And then we started two podcasts, Shoulder to Shoulder, which kind of focuses on how war affects people, providing people a platform to talk about the war on terrorism, from veterans to military family members to combat interpreters, just for a way that the civilians that don't know about the war, that way they can go somewhere and learn about it from the people who fought the war, not from people with fancy degrees, not with people with rank on their shoulder, but from the people who've experienced it firsthand, because war isn't an algebra problem. So that's the first one. The second one is Stories from My Brothers, Tales of the Afghan Security Forces. And I just bring on my Afghan brothers and let them talk about their careers. We just did our third one, have a fourth one coming out this week. We're talking with Afghans who speak fluent English. And, this week we're going to release an episode from the third Afghan to graduate from West Point. He went to West Point. He went to Ranger School. He went to, the infantry officer course, and then went back and led an Anasat commando team. So what we do with that one is we try to, combat the narrative that all the Afghans just one day just said, I've had enough. And they just put down their weapons and surrendered because they didn't fight. I want them to have a platform to tell their story and tell their point of view, because they were the ones that were there in the fight. And so I think it's important to set the record straight about that. And so hopefully those two podcasts accomplish those things.
Yeah, give it a listen, everyone. Will, you mentioned that, I believe we talked about this a bit on our last podcast, about just as the Afghans, folks like you had talked to, officers like you talked about, that gone to West Point, gone to Ranger School, just as they were starting to come into their own, the collapse happens. And I really wish we could have seen what would have happened if the Sami Sadats and Khoshal Sadats and other, what I would say, the up and coming officers, they were just hitting their just becoming generals. What if they could have taken charge of the Afghan security forces? They never got a chance to have that moment to overtake the warlords and the old, communists and such.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're exactly right. People don't understand is that it was going to take time to build. Now, we made some huge mistakes along the way building it, right? Really, really big ones. But we had developed a deep bench of Afghans who had raised up in our military and understood how we fought and had been raised a certain way. And they were just starting to get there. I mean, in the Afghan Air Force, I would say that almost every one of the wing commanders that they had, there was 4 wing commanders. Every one of them were Air War College graduates. That's where it was heading. And then when you started going down into the ANA and some of their more elite units, you saw that almost all of the, field grade, lieutenant colonels, 1-stars, they were all, Western educated, British, Canadian, anywhere from all over the place. And they went. So what could have been, it was just lack of patience.
Yeah. Yeah. They were what? 3-5 years from getting to the position of where we'd actually have Western trained and competent Afghan leaders
Yeah.
who knew how to motivate their men too,
Yes.
particularly the leaders that were coming from, as you mentioned, the Air Force or the Afghan Special Operations Forces, the commandos.
Hmm.
If they could have got cross-pollinated into the right regular military, regular Afghan army, we could have started to see some results. And just, yeah, as you said, we had a lack of patience.
Hmm. Hmm. It was, they are, I am friends with so many Afghan officers, and a lot of them, they will tell you they were like, it wasn't going great. We had a lot of things going wrong. Corruption was a problem, especially
Mhm.
inside the Ministry of Interior. There were some issues with, the way it was constructed. But it wasn't really until the Doha Agreement we started sniffing that was going to happen. That it really started to hit us what was happening, and that betrayal. And I mean, I had my host basically. I thought I was talking to you, Bill, because I had the guy on this week, Major Mirzada, and he said, "Look, you could have just left. Why didn't you just leave? Because you guys left before. When you pulled down, you left 90,000 of y'all left, and we still survived. But
Yeah.
because you legitimized them and you brought them to the table, and then told us we couldn't do offensive operations, I was like, what did you expect to happen?"
Yeah, the agreement and then the rapid pullout was just an absolute. The Doha agreement, of course, and
Yeah.
then the Biden withdrawal was an absolute demoralizing effect on the Afghan security forces. It is completely misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
You had fence sitters at that
Yep.
point just jump to the other side of the fence. People understood the way the wind was blowing, and they went with it. And yeah, it's tragic. And the implications of that, well, let's get into the topic today, Will.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah.
so we over the last week, you had the head of Al-Qaeda, Saif al-Adel. Well, he's not, Al-Qaeda hasn't officially named him after the
Right.
death of Ayman al-Zawahiri. Um, Al-Qaeda never admitted he was killed in Kabul, and the Taliban never confirmed it as well. Reasons being, and we'll get into that a little bit later, because it creates uncomfortable problems both for Al-Qaeda, because their
Mm.
next leader is sheltering in Iran, and for the Taliban, because they've claimed that Al-Qaeda isn't there. So anyway, Saif al-Adel, under a pseudonym, writes an article for a publication that was put out by As-Sahab, which is Al-Qaeda's propaganda media
Yeah.
branch, right? And he calls for people across the globe, for Westerners and others, to migrate to Afghanistan, to gain experience, to conduct attacks against the West. And what they say in quotes here, the Zionists, of course, the Jews. So this is
Yeah.
an attempt by Al-Qaeda to capitalize on the Israel's conflict with the Palestinians in Gaza and the wider Middle East. Will, what are your thoughts, first of all, on Saif al-Adel releasing this statement? And do you think this is a credible threat
Oh,
from
absolutely.
Al-Qaeda?
I think it's an absolutely credible threat. I mean, you know, when people tell you who they are, you should listen to them. And all too often, I spent 20 years inside the American intelligence community, and unfortunately, if it doesn't say, top secret, SCI, whatever, blah, 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 on a piece of information, people tend to dismiss it. Unclassed information just carries not as much weight. And that's unfortunate, because here we have the leader of Al-Qaeda calling people to come to Afghanistan and learn from the Talibs, learn from them, learn from the Haqqani network, and then take what they learn outward. And then they're riding the coattails of what Hamas has been doing, because everybody thinks they're winning. And so, they're gonna, try to take that momentum and use it, because if Hamas is allowed to survive, which would be a victory for Hamas, that's my opinion. If they're allowed to survive, that will be a victory, and they can ride the momentum from that victory and the Taliban's victory, right? And that is just a huge momentum for these people. And I don't know how. I wish I didn't think that, but I absolutely do. And I think, he is an absolute danger, and so are the people underneath him.
Yeah, I concur. Will, you said something that I absolutely agree with in there. Just one point.
Yeah.
I agree with everything you said. You said when people tell you who you are, you should listen. And this is, by the way, why I read whatever jihadist propaganda that I can get my hands on from Al-Qaeda, from the Islamic State, because they are actually very honest in their communications. And I'll just use one example here, and this
Mhm.
is the most simplistic. Al-Qaeda in the 1990s, well before it conducted 9/11, issued not one, but two declarations of war against the United States. These were, and then subsequently we had the bombings in the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998, the attack on the U.S. Cole in 2000, and then ultimately we get the 9/11 attacks in Washington and New York. They told us we should listen. Saif al-Adel is saying, he says in there that he wants to encourage Westerners to conduct attacks, or people living in the West to conduct attacks in the West, and that they'll do what they can to facilitate. So, Will, does Al-Qaeda have them in Afghanistan have the means to make this happen?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they have training camps, right? They never left, right? They were always there. My last year, they were there. It's not like we left and then like they walked in. No, they've always been there. And that's because and it's important to track who's who in the zoo and then, all the labels that they place upon themselves. But like what happens, in my opinion, is that we get focused in on this Western mindset of block and line charts, right? Like he is Al Qaeda, that's who he is, and he can't have anything to do with the Taliban or the Haqqani network or IME or whatever. And it's like, no, they're all interlinked like this, people. And so the Taliban controls the state. The Taliban controls the state. It is a terror state that has helped and has allies in the region. Iran, Russia, as you saw the Taliban ministers go up there this week to do some conferences. Pakistan. So like these are all China. They're still there. The people who didn't leave is what should worry you, right? The Pakistanis, the Russians, the Iranians, they all stayed. When like I said last time, I think when President Biden announced the withdrawal, people inside the Iranian embassy cheered, and I have that from a good source. And so, they have the ability to do so because they have people that have the means and ability to do so at their disposal.
Yeah, 2 points from this, Will. You had said, Al-Qaeda never left, and you were 100% correct. That's something Tom Jocelyn and I documented at the Long War Journal when it was very popular to say Al-Qaeda was decimated, defeated, degraded, done. There's a whole bunch of other D words I'm missing from there. And I know people are tired of hearing me talk about that. Then we see articles, Al-Qaeda's returned, Al-Qaeda's resurgent in Afghanistan. No, they never left Afghanistan. They were always there in the background. What they were is pretty clever at hiding it. But even then, not so clever. And Will, you were in Afghanistan. The U.S. military would release press releases until they stopped, actually, at one point in time. But they targeted Al-Qaeda leaders regularly. We killed a member of one of Al-Qaeda, Sudani, an Al-Qaeda Shura leader in a raid, in the 2010s. And I could detail others. I got a whole list of Al-Qaeda leaders that were killed in Afghanistan. We know Al-Qaeda leaders are there today. And it's so frustrating to hear that idea. This is the covering for the Taliban, the excuse making to really to set the stage for withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, and people, they'll be like, well, the real threat is the Islamic State and it's not Al-Qaeda and the Talibs, they're sworn enemies, right? They're sworn enemies of each other. I'm just like, have y'all not realized how they came about? Like disaffected members of this and that they've worked together when it suits their interests. Like, yeah, they might fight here and there and maybe they're going to go at it. But like when it comes to us, that's a little bit different then. Like they will absolutely share resources if it means it gets to kill Americans or Jews. I mean, or anybody in the West for that matter. And so like this idea that because somebody said this or that, I'm like, look where they are, read what they say, look at the history of these organizations. Like, no, they know each other. Yeah.
Yeah, their opposition isn't ideological as much as it is practical.
Right.
It's more of leadership and organizational structure and who reports to who over the over any ideological differences. And we'll get into working with the Taliban to fight ISIS later. I'm going to hold my comments on that one. The second point with your comments, you're right. You said it. The Taliban controls the state. So what does Al-Qaeda have in Afghanistan? It has both state sponsorship and it has safe haven that is given by the Taliban. This isn't the Taliban looking the other way. This is the Taliban actively supporting Al-Qaeda. And, again, people are probably tired of hearing me say this, but I'll run down the numbers. This is according to the United Nations Analytical Support Sanctions and Monitoring Team. And by the way, this tracks with historical information that I've gathered on al-Qaeda and their presence in Afghanistan. There are training camps in 10 of the 34 provinces. By the way, I think that number is low because there are no camps reported in Paktika, and Khost provinces, Haqqani network bastions, where we've known al-Qaeda to run training camps, even when the U.S. military was in the country. Madrasa, or religious schools, in 5 of the 34 provinces. There is they've identified safe houses in 4, and I'm sure that number is far greater given where the training camps are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a media operations center and a weapons storage depot, which is located in Panjshir, the former home of the National Resistance Front, which is both a finger in the eye as well as a strategic location in the middle of the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
That's the infrastructure that al-Qaeda can bring to bear for if it wants to train foreign fighters and bring them out to the West. Now, I'll say this, it's probably difficult to get in Afghanistan, and it's probably exceedingly difficult to get out of Afghanistan. Then again, you have countries that are now U.S. adversaries, or dare I say enemies, countries, what if Russia sees it to their advantage to allow al-Qaeda operatives to pass through their country and wash them with passports or things of that nature? We can't discount things like this, even though Russia has an interest that does not like al-Qaeda, nor does al-Qaeda like the Russians. You always have Pakistan, you always have Iran that are adversaries of the United States.
And they're not so squeamish.
And they're far more willing to do so. I mean, the U.S. doesn't even recognize Pakistan as an enemy.
Right. So, exactly.
So these are the problems that we have, Will. And it's I take this threat. I take it so seriously.
And I just, we should take it seriously, but we aren't. We're allowing them to travel now, right? I mean, that is basically where we've reached, that we are allowing, senior leaders to travel around the world and visit, different capitals, right? And so we obviously don't worry if it's a big deal to have them out and about. And it's just unbelievable to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Our southern border is wide open. Mm-hmm. People say, well, we're much better at, security and homeland security. Not with that southern border open like it is. And there's been reports of hundreds of suspected terrorists or people that the FBI is trying to track crossing the border. To say it can't happen again. When you give an enemy the time and space and the safe haven and the state sponsorship to innovate, no one expected box cutters and pilots on 9/11. I don't want to give my enemy, an enemy that is patient, by the way,
absolutely,
the time and space to plan their next attack. I don't think it'll be a 9/11 style. It could be something completely different, and that's my concern.
I totally share it, 100%. I think it's only a matter of time. Yeah,
and I really hope we're wrong about this.
Me too. I hope I'm absolutely wrong and it never happens, and that everybody can hold this against me and say, look, Will Selber, yet again, being hyperbolic, and he doesn't know, and he always says things are going to go bad. I know. People have been saying that to me my entire career. I'm used to it, though.
Will, you're hardened, and that's why you're on this podcast.
There you go.
We've gone through same experiences under different circumstances. I was dismissed as, I can't do. Oh, Bill, now the war in Iraq is over. I'm like, wait, what? The war in Iraq's over because we withdrew? Okay, let's see how that goes.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? I mean, this was 2011. Here we are 13 years later. I still have a job. What can I tell you? I'm like, well, A, it's not over. And by the way, within 2 years, Islamic State takes over, which I warned people because I was watching videos, again, looking at the enemy propaganda. There was this one video, Will, I don't know if you've ever seen it. It was in 2011. And you see al-Qaeda in Iraq take over 2 towns that I had been to, Barwana and Haditha. They roll in heavy, military Humvees, kitted up, go in, kill all the police, publicly execute the police chief, take control of the town for about 12 hours, and then just disappear in the desert. And I did a debate with, I can't remember the guy's name. It was Admiral Mullen's chief of staff, and Peter Bergen, and Tom Jocelyn and I did a debate. Peter Bergen turns to me in 2011. He says, Bill, and this is on a video somewhere, by the way. I think I actually have a clip of it somewhere. Al-Qaeda has been defeated in Iraq. The war's over. What are we talking about here? And I was like, it's not what I'm seeing. And lo and behold, 2 years later, right? So I'm sure, Will, you could probably have a ton of stories like
Yeah,
this.
I was in Diyala in 2010. On a provincial reconstruction team, and I was bebopping around, and that was the first time ever that I've ever been in an American war where things were going okay, and I was like, wow, look, the security was post-surge, it was
Yeah.
good, it was pretty good. I was like, holy smokes, hey, this is great. Look at this. I was floored, right? I'm always like, somebody's like, I think we're winning, and I'm like, I don't believe you. Automatic reflex. I'm like, we're succeeding on the battlefield. I'm like, liar. I mean, just automatically, I don't believe you until you prove it. And so when I went over there, I was like, holy smokes, this is for real. And then we started pulling out, and that's when I knew that I was like, oh, this won't last.
And it was easy to understand why. Like one of the things I focused on was the awakenings, right? The awakenings,
Yeah.
concerned citizens, or whatever you wanted to call it, whatever they call themselves in certain areas. The Iraqi government was distrustful of them because a lot of them were, frankly, former insurgents.
Yep.
And they were Sunnis, and the Shia didn't trust them. But it took time. What did we lose? Patience.
Yep. Patience.
President Obama wanted out of Iraq at all costs. He left within 2 years. The awakenings dissolved, and the insurgency regrew. And it's yeah.
Well, now we've hit the point right in Afghanistan, right, where we pulled out, and now since we are, seems like to me, and I know you agree, on the path of recognition that we are allowing their leaders to meet with other state-sponsored, our allies, right? So, I mean, Sarah June Haqqani over the weekend, like, he somehow he got removed off of a sanctions and monitoring list, or the restrictionist travel list to be able to fly internationally.
And it's let's talk about that. Will, you have a great article over at the Bulwark. Everyone, I highly recommend you go ahead and read it. Title: Why is the head of the terrorist Haqqani network traveling with impunity? Impunity. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm sure, like a lot of y'all, I was shocked when I saw that Haqqani was in the UAE, right? Meeting with the UAE president. I think it was June 5th. I saw that some of my contacts alerted me to it, and I saw the AP press reporting on it, and then I read this foolish thing that from other experts about it as well. And so I wrote about just him going to UAE, right, where if he meets the president in Abu Dhabi, right? I mean, Al Dhafra is not that far away. I'm like, what is going on here? Sarah June Haqqani, FBI. $10 million reward, the blood of thousands of Americans, our allies, European allies, Afghan allies, just gallivanting around. And that was unbelievable to me at first. And then I started seeing, I was like, I wonder where he's going to go next.
Yeah, right.
That's exactly the first thing I thought was, where is he going next? Because this isn't it. And so I started digging, and I started, following all the accounts, because it's not rocket science. These people tell you what they're going to do. And lo and behold, I woke up, I think it was the 7th, and Haqqani associated Twitter accounts were live streaming him at the Hajj in Saudi Arabia, conducting the Hajj. And it's just not him, right? I just want to say this. It's just not him, right? It's the head of the Taliban's military intelligence network. His brother was there, Anas. The deputy minister of defense was there. The former shadow governor of Helmand was there. There was a who's who of Taliban people doing their first Hajj.
Yeah. Nearly all of them, I believe, I have to go back and review the list, are specially designated global terrorists.
Yeah.
Sarah June Haqqani. I mean, look, I'm guessing most of our listeners know who he is, but I'll just make sure we give it a quick rundown.
Sure.
Again, specially designated global terrorist. His Haqqani network, which he runs, established by his father, Jalaluddin Haqqani, is a foreign terrorist organization. The designations were explicit that both Sirajuddin Haqqani and his network are avid supporters of al-Qaeda. Every member of his family or network that's been designated, I think all but 2 or 3, I've documented these over the years. The designations admitted or pointed to direct support of al-Qaeda financially, training, recruiting for them, fundraising overseas for al-Qaeda. Sirajuddin is also the interior minister for the Taliban's Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. That's the name of the Taliban's government. And also one of the 2 deputy emirs for the Taliban. So we're not talking about some low-level Taliban schmo here. we're talking, Sirajudin Haqqani, all his people also sheltered Ayman al-Zawahiri when he was killed at a safe house in July 2022 by the U.S. This is the top. I argue he's the most influential Taliban leader. People say it's the Emir. I disagree. Nothing gets done in Afghanistan without Siraj Haqqani being involved. And when the Taliban had their little almost breakup over the scandal of them playing Weekend at Bernie's with the corpse of Mullah Omar, Siraj and his father were the ones that put the band back together, that got everyone back and focused to fight the real enemy, which was the U.S. and the West.
Yeah. I tell you what, and from just a base level, let me tell you, he's the man who killed my friends. Yeah. He killed my brothers, and he killed my friends in Afghanistan, men and women that I served along next to. He murdered Afghans, friends of mine, just for talking to me, right? They disappeared and never to be heard from again. I advised an Afghan general officer who is no longer with us, who was a 10, 15-year intelligence officer, human intelligence officer. I was his advisor, and he would show me what he did to any of the sources that he found out about. It wasn't pretty. And so this is American combat veterans know who Sirajudin Haqqani is. He is their killer. Yeah. Period.
Will, I want to thank you for putting a human face on this. Part of might be my coping mechanism, and it might be from where I approach this, but is it's clinical, it's analytical, sure. But I do know that real people are killed by these people, and they have stories, and so I thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we have to, when we track these men and when we sound the alarms. One of the things that I've learned is that we have to explain it to people sometimes at that level. This man is the one who is killing American soldiers for the last 20 years in Afghanistan.
And he's killing, as in his position as interior minister, he's still hunting down.
Yes, he's murdering our allies as we speak. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's something that people just don't know because it's not in the press as much. But every week, I need to start tracking them about how many guys that they kill. I think I probably will, but it's 3, 4, 5 that comes up through my feed that I keep track of former Afghan officers or civilians who are just whacked. And people think that it's not this is a different type of assassination campaign. They have time as their luxury. They're not in a huge hurry to just do this meticulous campaign, one thing after another. They're targets of opportunity when they get the chance because they feel very secure where they are right now. And the reason why they feel very secure is because they control the state, and now they're live streaming when they go out of the state. Basically as a, hey, we're here.
Yeah, right? It's disgraceful. If we had a competent government that was willing to exact revenge, which, look, I think we need an element of that. I'm sorry. Someone like Siraj Haqqani needs to go. Mm-hmm. He'd have stepped foot on the ground of UAE, and he would have been dead within 24 hours. And that's the way it should be. And the message would be to other Taliban leaders. Obviously, I would love for him to get to his whole cadre.
Sure.
And look, Saudi Arabia is supposed to be our allies. The UAE is supposed to be our allies. It isn't that he just attended these places. He was welcomed with open arms. It's exactly right. Absolutely disgraceful.
I just this is Haqqani is the one. He's closest to Pakistani ISI.
Closest to the Taliban, closest to Al-Qaeda as well.
Right, exactly.
He's the nexus. He is the most dangerous. Now, I'll say this: if we killed him tomorrow, I suspect there's someone within his organization, Haji Mali Khan, or there's others who. But boy, the stature that Siraj with his father's name, and look, he went on the Hajj for the first time.
I know. And we let him do it.
Happen, right? Look at let's and I'm not saying this to be derisive because he was in a bad position, but look at the son of the Lion of Panjshir, right? And his performance, right, versus Sirajudin Haqqani and his performance in the Afghan war, right? Obviously I'm talking about the current head of the National Resistance Front, right? One is a question mark, right? That has to earn leadership. And the other one is at the pinnacle of his career, who played a major role in getting the US out of Afghanistan and then conquering the country. And then now is playing a major role in attempting to establish international recognition. He's a highly dangerous individual. I remember in the U.S. military in 2007, Will, when they put their first reward out for him, and it was $75,000. And I was like, "Ooh, this is really interesting," because I was very familiar with his father and had an understanding of what the Haqqani network was kind of just becoming a thing. Like we were just starting to understand it. And I tracked him. We tried to kill him in drone strikes in Pakistan multiple times, and I know he's been targeted in Afghanistan. So, to watch his career, I mean, it's hard to think of a Taliban leader that has had a more just a stunning and rapid rise into the ranks.
Let me ask you a question, Bill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think that this is a play to try to make him the ruler? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. And I don't like to think this way. And I'm just like, is this a way to put the scale on him? Because I just don't know how we don't know this is going to happen. But if we allow this to happen and we knew about it, is this an attempt by Pakistani ISI to emplace somebody who they can control better inside of Afghanistan? I don't know.
I have two theories on this. Okay. I say that's possible.
Okay.
But I also wonder if he likes to operate more from that position that he's in right now.
Okay.
So the Taliban, Mullah Omar was reclusive. And the current emir of the Taliban, Mullah Habibatullah Akhundzada, is also sort of reclusive. And they have a very strong religious background. So Habibatullah Akhundzada was the jurisprudence leader, in the Taliban Shura, right? So that's his background. Sirjan probably doesn't have the religious chops that the Taliban would want. I think that he has all of the benefits without taking on the top position. I think he's, better placed. I have a good friend, if you're listening, he describes him as the Taliban shogun.
Okay.
And, so he's wielding the power from a military standpoint. Everyone knows who really is the most important Taliban leader. So yeah, I listen, so I look at it this way. I wouldn't be surprised if he became Taliban leader, but he's already a deputy emir, right? So he's,
what do you need the crown for?
What does he actually, would the crown make his job and his position a little bit more difficult? Like he can, so the Taliban leader, again, we've only had two.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to judge how the Taliban do this. Yeah. Actually, so I'm sorry, I'm wrong. We've had three, but they've never been like really big on traveling and doing those things. It's almost like their job is like the Taliban leader is more concerned about the social internal aspects of the country. Siraj, I don't think if he was Taliban emir, he'd be able to.
Has Habibatullah Akhundzada done the Hajj yet?
I don't know the answer to that.
Because that's something that'd be interesting to me. Because look, if he hasn't, and I don't know if if Yaqub has done it or not.
I don't know if Yaqub has done it either.
Because that means he's the only one of the three who I consider some of the bigger players to have done that. And I don't know. It just seems like it's an interesting thing. It puts him, he can have the honorary title Haji now, right? This is something that he can claim now that he went, and that is a big boost for Wasta, right? Yeah. I'll have to do some digging to see. I don't think they have, and I'll be interested to see how that plays out. Like, how are they going to take the fact that he went and did that and that he gets to be the one that gets to go, unless it's going to happen to other ones, right? Unless this is just the first one. And I'm thinking it's not. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe it is more come. But a lot of these guys went. It wasn't just him, right? Other members of his cadre were able to go.
Yes.
Maybe this is just the first one of the rest of them coming. And the rehabilitation tour. I don't know.
Yeah, these are great questions, Will, and Yaqub isn't designated to my knowledge.
I don't think so.
So he should have no problem traveling.
Yeah, right.
Then again, Siraj had no problem either. So
Yeah.
So what are we talking about here? But maybe they don't want all their leadership in
At
one
one point.
country at
Yeah.
one point in time either.
Yeah.
So no,
Yeah.
it's a great point. The as you said, the WASP, the credibility that he gets from doing this, and believe me, the credibility that he gets for appearing with the head of the UAE
Oh,
and the videos of him at the Hajj. I mean, again, he's already was a star.
yeah.
He is. It is interesting when following the Taliban supporters. I'm sure you follow the same ones.
Yep.
What's his name? Jamal Muhammad's a big one. I think that's his name,
Mm-hmm.
right? And some others. They're just and they're big ones. They're influential ones. Let's call them Taliban influencers. Um, Boy, they're constantly salivating
Oh
over
yeah.
Sirajudin Haqqani.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is a guy who wouldn't have his picture taken, and is now all of a sudden on videos and traveling, jet setting. It's again, it's a great questions you ask, and again, I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe he is the new generation of the Taliban emir.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is what the next Taliban emir might look like.
Yeah, I mean, I know that like the idea of factions inside the Taliban is hotly contested, and like, what does this mean? Blah blah blah. They have had there has been reported in the press, and who knows like about what's actually accurate or not, but like dueling press conferences and a little bit of tension here and there. I don't know how much of that is overblown, but I'm interested to see how this plays out when he gets home
Yeah.
because, yeah.
And
I
on
mean,
the issue of the squabbles, right?
yeah,
I view these as like squabbles within a
yeah,
political party here,
sure,
as opposed
sure.
to opposing parties, right? These are
No,
differences in
100%.
policies
Yes.
within. How do
Right.
we? None of these guys really look at the Taliban's quote, right? We're in year 3. It's going to be 3 years soon.
Yeah, yeah,
Interim government. There's only 2 or 3 ministers that have been replaced.
yeah, yeah.
So if we're talking about a very divisive situation here,
Mm-hmm.
I just don't see it.
No, no. I think, yeah, I should couch it as in these are the type of squabbles that you would see inside of any political party to a certain extent, right? Like people have their own egos to a certain extent, and maybe they're still tight knit, but human jealousy is always gonna, in my opinion, will always play a little bit into the mix. It's like, well, he got to go to the Hajj. Why didn't I get to go to the Hajj? Right? I mean, was he the first one? Why not me? It's stuff like that. I always think of, because I know these guys. And I know that they're humans, right? And they want to succeed and be successful inside their organizations too. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out and who's next, because that's really the real question: is who's the next one that's going to go?
Yeah, if Yakub hasn't gone, you can bet your ass he's going to be going soon.
Yeah, for sure.
Within the next year. I would, if it's not at this year's, it will be at the next, because he's going to definitely want that. Yeah, look, there's definitely, internal issues. And the thing about the Taliban and what they do agree on is maintaining the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, because they all got their slice of the pie. They'll squabble internally between them, without a doubt.
But they signed the Doha agreement, Bill. Like it's they're not going to do that. Do you know that they're having another Doha conference coming up? And I'm just like, why?
Right.
What do you like?
What's the point?
Like, didn't they break this? Like, they took over the country and like Al Qaeda's there. Like, what type of fantasy world is this?
Yeah, they were living. Look, you had this one bothered me over the weekend. Barnett Rubin.
Ah, God bless.
Yes. He comes out in an article and tells us Sirajudin, I'm quote here, and I'm inserting the name. Sirajudin Haqqani, quote, no longer poses a threat to Americans, end quote. How does Barnett Rubin know this? What did we just talk about here? Taliban training camps called to come to Afghanistan to launch attacks against their Al Qaeda training camps, supported by the Taliban, calls to conduct attacks against the West. What are we talking about? I mentioned this because I'm sure he's all for whatever this Doha conference is about, because they're so invested in the narrative that they helped create that led to the collapse of Afghanistan. So they just got to keep going forward with it.
Well, I mean, this is a man whose history in Afghanistan, I would say, is lukewarm, and I'm being charitable there.
Yeah.
For those who don't know Barnett Rubin, he was played an influential role in the Doha, Obama's Doha attempts to, create the whole embassy and stuff like that that disintegrated, and that was a lot of him. And he just, if you ever want to know who that guy is, just, I'm blocked from his Twitter account, but you can just, follow his Twitter account and see what he comments on the Israel-Hamas war. And then that should absolutely tell you what he would think about what's going on in Afghanistan.
Yeah. Yeah. No, listen, the one nice thing about Twitter, well, I guess it's X now.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll ever get used to that. Is you get to see who people who aren't careful, who they really are and what they really believe. And I'm all for that. It's good to know, right?
I would rather know. Yeah.
Yeah, I would too. It's one thing I like reading jihadi propaganda. I mean, how else were we able to figure out what the Taliban was doing? Did their actions match their words? They did. And that's how, we were able to predict what was happening.
Yeah.
So, real quick on the Saif al-Adel's statement.
Yeah.
What does it say about the Taliban Al-Qaeda relationship? I got to admit, I was a little surprised that he came out with this, that was so open about this message.
He's confident that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Not just he, but the Taliban as well.
Oh. They're not, I mean, like, why would they? I mean, if you don't think the Taliban's cocky, I mean, just understand that Sergeant Haqqani just live streamed his entire trip to the Hajj. I mean, right? The guy who, most of the intelligence community had like some type of, the FBI picture and maybe a side one. And now he's just like, here I am. It first started when he went to a Minister of Interior police graduation, I think a couple of years. That's the first time I saw him.
Yes, that was the first time. Yeah, we actually had him on video. I remember that. Everyone's like, whoa.
So that was his first one. And he got a little bit more confident. He started speaking about it. Hey, I can be a statesman. Hey, I can be a statesman. I'm a statesman. And now he's just going to go and do statesman things. Meet with other presidents. Yeah.
The confidence is there from both. And it's something I don't think that many they're not understanding. Look, I get people are focusing on the Israel-Hamas war, and then obviously the wider war around that, the Houthis and the Iraqi militias and Hezbollah in the north, and then Iran at the center of that spider web. Then you have Russia, Ukraine. Then you have, concerns about China, all justified. But what I do know is Al-Qaeda attacked us on 9/11 and killed almost 3,000 people and caused billions of dollars in damage and ruined tens, if not hundreds of thousands of lives and shut down this country. I remember that. That is what they are willing to do. And, I get back to, I don't want to give them the time and space to let that happen again.
Yep. I mean, look, people just, one of the things I tell people a lot is like, I understand that you're not interested in Afghanistan, but it's interested in you.
Yes. Tom and I always said, if what happened in Afghanistan stayed in Afghanistan, we could shrug our shoulders and, shrug off a brush war.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. It follows you back. Afghanistan has a nasty way of coming back to bite you. It really does.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, like, just running away won't. You would think if you just were like, I don't want to do this anymore. Please stop hitting us. Here's some money. Here's some reconstruction. Here's like a Walmart, free trade, capitalism. Come, we can make you a consumer. Nope. That's not it. They'll take it. I mean, like, thank you for the money. I appreciate it. We'll take it. Now we're still going to come and kill you.
Yeah, exactly, Will. Exactly. Because their ideology, their jihadist ideology is paramount.
Right.
And that's what people refuse to accept. It's not about healthcare. And it's not about education. It's not about consumerism. It's not about the school system. It's about them dominating us, about them wanting to subjugate us and impose their harsh version of Sharia. It's what they say. And by the way, they took control of Afghanistan. It's what they're doing. If they do it to their own people, what do you think they would do to you?
I mean, they're flogging people again. They're doing beheadings. They're hanging people, rapes, all that type of stuff. The last year in Afghanistan, I heard constantly, look, they're going to want international legitimacy. And that's the way that we're going to be able to control them, is by offering them legitimacy and the money, and they'll be able to, we'll be able to mold that behavior.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
Good
luck with that.
The Taliban seeks legitimacy. Therefore, they'll moderate their behavior. No, the Taliban will do what they want, and you'll grant them legitimacy because you're desperate. I mean, I think everyone should put on, all these people should put the GIMP mask on and jump in the GIMP box and make themselves happy, because that's essentially what you're doing here. And yeah. All right, last question.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
No, after you.
No. Yeah, I just, I think you can take it from Afghanistan and you can just superimpose it on so many things. It's just like, when you look at Hamas, right? And I study a lot the Israeli war as well, and I write for the Bulwark. It's just, look, you understand that Hamas continues to tell you that all they want to do is survive this. And if they survive, they'll keep doing it. And yet we have convinced ourselves that there must be some type of triple bank shot treaty that somehow can make them into Jordan or something like that, right? Or Egypt or something like that. No. They keep on telling you that they want to kill Jews. And they're not going to stop. You may get a break, I guess, if that's what you want. If you want a break and I don't know, to do it all over again, then I guess get into a treaty. We can rebuild it all. And then they'll launch another one and we'll be right back here yet again. But I mean, you'll get that 5 or 7 years or however long it takes them to reconstitute, rearm, and do it all over again, because it's who they are. It's the same thing with the Taliban. We can debate all the different ideologies and this type of Islam and that type of Islam, and we can get really into the weeds. But at a higher level, it's just they just want to kill us.
Yeah. No, and they're patient.
Yes.
And they're deceptive.
Yes.
And they're,
and they know us.
They do. Far better than we know them. We don't even know ourselves. That's the problem.
That's exactly right.
That's a whole nother podcast for another day.
Absolutely.
Will, last topic here.
Okay.
Is the Biden administration seeking to partner with the Taliban to fight the Islamic State Khorasan province? And should it?
My suspicions are that they are. And that, President Biden has said as much in different press conferences. He didn't say we are working with the Taliban to defeat the Islamic State, but he has, in different walking away from a press conference a few months ago, he basically implied that. He has made no mention of the fact that he thinks that the Islamic State that the Taliban and the Islamic State are mortal enemies, and so the Taliban will automatically take care of the Islamic State for us. And I just think that is not going to happen. They don't have the resources to really put a clamp on them, and their ideologies are the same, and they've worked together in the past. I just, practical differences aside. Yeah,
I always argue you shouldn't partner with terrorists to fight terrorists. It's a bad idea. Never works. They're going to use us. Mm-hmm. Look, we partnered with them to fight the Islamic State in 2015, 16, 17, 18. How'd that work out for us? Guess who runs Afghanistan now? So yeah, absolute mistake. Thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone, I encourage you, check out Will's podcast, Shoulder to Shoulder, Untold Stories from a Forgotten War, and Stories from My Brothers, Tales of the Afghan Security Forces. Also, give Will a follow on X, or what used to be known as Twitter, @AggieWill00. Will, thanks again for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Bill. Thank you so much.
And a little teaser, Will and I are going to be back on. We're going to have a very special guest. Okay, we'll tell you, General Sami Sadat, former top-notch Afghan general. I had the pleasure of testifying alongside him in Congress. Was one of the true fighters, the true heroes of the Afghan military. So Will and I will have the honor and pleasure of interviewing Sammy. Looking forward to that and getting you back on, Will.
Thank you. I can't wait.
And thanks, everyone, for listening to today's episode of Generation Jihad. Just a reminder, you can listen to us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe to Generation Jihad and leave us a review, preferably a positive one, but only if we earned it. Thanks again, and we'll see you all again real soon.